Hi everyone! Welcome to the Great Salt Lake exhibit, where we're going to be learning more about how the lake has changed over time and its significance to modern life. But to start our explorations, we'll need to go back millions of years to the Pleistocene epoch. The Pleistocene lasted from 2.6 million years ago to 12,000 years ago. This epoch experienced the most recent ice age and features animals such as mammoths and mastodons. Along with these distinctive large land mammals, the Pleistocene hosted many species still alive today, such as some birds, mammals, flowering plants, and insects. The end of the Pleistocene saw the extinction of many large land mammals, such as the mammoths. To learn more about this topic, make sure to check out our videos from the Past Worlds exhibit. An important feature here in Utah during the Pleistocene was Lake Bonneville, an ancient lake that formed about 32,000 years ago. This lake was much larger than the modern Great Salt Lake. Lake Bonneville spanned about 325 miles in length, reaching into Idaho and down the western side of Utah to about Milford. It stretched out covering the West Desert and came all the way up here to the Natural History Museum of Utah. Here, we would be standing on the shores of the lake. You can see on the map here an outline of where the lake would have been compared to where we are today. Lake Bonneville was home to many animals, including fish, birds, and mammoths. Unlike the modern lake, Lake Bonneville was freshwater, not saltwater. The lake was fed by precipitation, rivers and streams, and even melting glaciers. This freshwater was able to support a different scope of life than the saltwater from the modern lake. Take a look out your window. What do you think your neighborhood looked like during the Pleistocene? So how did Lake Bonneville become the Great Salt Lake we all know today? Over thousands of years, Lake Bonneville experienced multiple flood events that broke through natural dams in Idaho, lowering the water level in the lake. Combined with this, Utah became warmer and drier than it was during the Pleistocene epoch. As climate changed, the lake experienced more evaporation and continued to shrink in size. As Lake Bonneville shrank, it left behind multiple remnants, including Utah Lake, Sevier Lake, the Bonneville Salt Flats, and of course, the Great Salt Lake. The Great Salt Lake exists in the lowest depression of the Great Basin. The Great Basin is the watershed we live in that spans almost all of Nevada, much of Oregon and Utah, and parts of Idaho, California, and Wyoming. Due to the location of the Great Salt Lake in the lowest depression, it is a terminal lake, meaning that water flows into the lake, but no water flows out of the lake. This is what causes the lake's signature high salinity levels. All water has some salt, but fresh water typically has very little. The water flowing into the Great Salt Lake has very low salt levels, but as the water continues to evaporate from the lake, the salt level, or salinity, becomes more concentrated or higher. This high salinity creates a home for animals and plants with specific adaptations, such as saltgrass and brine shrimp. Now you may be asking yourself if the lake is finished changing. And it isn't. The lake is constantly undergoing change, and will continue to do so into the future as the industry changes around its banks and its climate change continues. Modern day changes can be observed by noticing the level of the lake. The most recent flood from the Great Salt Lake was in 1983, when there was so much water that some of the streets of Salt Lake City were turned into rivers. Another place to observe the water level changes is the Spiral Jetty. The Spiral Jetty is a land art by Robert Smithson, created in 1970. Over the years, the lake level has sometimes covered the art piece, but right now it is above water and can easily be visited. Another way to see how the lake has changed over time is to look for the microbialites. Microbialites are large, bulbous, sedimentary rock formations created by blue and green algae. These formations used to be commonplace in environments millions of years ago, but now only grow in extreme environments, like the Great Salt Lake, due to grazing animals. Microbialites would not have existed in Lake Bonneville due to the fresh water, but the Great Salt Lake is the perfect home for microbialites to thrive in today because the high salinity levels decreases the number of other animals, plants, and algae that might compete for space or nutrients. Microbialites are one more piece of the puzzle that scientists study to understand the way our environment has changed over time.
We're going to explore more about life cycles in the lake. You know, there are no fish in Great Salt Lake, and some people think that there's nothing that lives here. But what does live in the Great Salt Lake? Many animals and plants call the Great Salt Lake home, but two very important creatures provide the foundation for the Great Salt Lake food web: brine shrimp and brine flies. Brine shrimp are one of the few animals that thrive in the Great Salt Lake's high salinity waters. These crustaceans are super tiny, at about 1/4 of an inch long. Full-grown adults have exoskeletons with many moving, small appendages. Hatching from tiny eggs called cysts, brine shrimp can be found in the lake from April to September. These eggs are so small that you could fit 150 on the head of a pin. In the Great Salt Lake, these eggs float on the surface until conditions are just right for hatching, usually in the spring when temperatures reach around 43 degrees Fahrenheit. One of the most amazing functions of these eggs is that they can lie dormant for months or even years until they are subject to the right conditions for hatching. During the summer months, the eggs are hatched within the females, who then give birth to live young called nauplii. Before nauplii becomes an adult, it must go through several molts where it sheds its exoskeleton and grows new features. In males, the adults form large frontal appendages for grasping onto females during mating. In females, they develop a large egg pouch located on their abdomen. These features make it easy to tell the difference between males and females just by looking closely. In the lake, brine shrimp feed on algae and bacteria. Brine shrimp also provide food for millions of migrating birds every year and are an important part of the Great Salt Lake ecosystem. Not only important for birds, brine shrimp also provide commercial shrimpers with billions of brine shrimp eggs, which are used as fish and prawn food. Much of this shrimp egg harvest is shipped internationally to fish farms and pet stores, making it a multi-million-dollar industry and an important piece of the Utah economy. The other important creature living in the lake are brine flies. Billions of these flies populate the beaches around the lake during the summertime and provide food for millions of birds that use the Great Salt Lake as a migratory stop. These flies are much smaller than normal houseflies, at about 1/4 of an inch when they are fully grown. The eggs, larvae, and pupae are all strictly aquatic, and they live their first 3 stages in the saltwater. The first stage are little eggs that lie suspended in the saltwater until conditions are just right, usually in the spring. Each female brine fly can lay about 100 eggs at a time. From this stage, the eggs hatch and become tiny twitching larvae that swim throughout the Great Salt Lake, feeding on algae and dead brine shrimp. These larvae eventually develop little cases like cocoons that we call pupae or pupal cases. Throughout the brine shrimp life cycle, these first 3 stages are all in the saltwater. It isn't until these pupal cases hatch into adult brine flies that they can escape to the surface of the lake in a tiny air bubble. The adults live for about 3 to 4 days along the beaches. If you've ever been to the Great Salt Lake, chances are you've seen clouds of brine flies and used pupal cases all along the beach. One amazing adaptation brine flies have is that they produce a waxy substance from their abdomen, which they then rub all over their bodies to make themselves waterproof. If the Great Salt Lake can teach us anything, it's to enjoy the small things in life.
The Great Salt Lake provides a home for many other animals, including millions of birds. And the marshy wetlands that surround the Great Salt Lake provide the perfect nesting spot for many different bird species. And those brine flies and brine shrimp at the lake, the most delicious meal for birds and growing fledglings. Each year, about 5 million birds visit the Great Salt Lake. It's one of the largest migratory stopover zones in the world. The habitat at the lake is a vital part of survival for many of these bird species. What birds have you noticed outside? Let's learn about a few of my favorite birds that visit the Great Salt Lake. First up, the white-faced ibis. These birds have beautiful iridescent feathers, a long curved beak, and during the springtime, a white outline on their face. These birds live in the wetland areas of the Great Salt Lake and wade into the water to find their food. Their beaks are extra special because they have feeling in the tip of their beak, similar to the tips of your fingers. Can you make a beak with your fingers? Imagine poking around in the mud at the bottom of a pond to find your food. Can you feel it? Another one of my favorite birds is the great blue heron. This bird has long legs, a thick, sturdy beak, and gray-blue feathers. Herons also feed by wading into the water, but they have a very different technique than the white-faced ibis. Herons use a sneak attack. They stand still in very shallow water, waiting for a fish to swim by. And when it does, stab! The heron spears the fish on its beak. Try it with me. Everyone get their beak ready. Stand very still and watch the water. Wait, wait, wait. A fish! Yum! I've saved one of my favorite birds for last, the eared grebe. This bird almost looks like a duck, but is a different species. In the springtime, eared grebes are mostly black, with yellow feathers standing out from a bright red eye. Like other grebes, the eared grebe has an elaborate courtship dance. Starts with a call, continues with dives underwater, feather fluffing, and a run on top of the water. Let's try part of that together. Okay, everyone. The one wing ready, now the other. Bow to your partner, dive underwater and pop up to dance on top of the water with your neck stretched out. Did you get that? Let's try it again all together. Wings tucked in, bow to your partner, dive underwater and pop up to dance. Very good, everyone. There are so many more birds to learn about at the Great Salt Lake and all around Utah. I hope that you continue to explore to see the amazing behaviors of animals and notice the ever-changing world around you. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi, and welcome to our backyard at the Natural History Museum of Utah. Here, we invite our youngest visitors to play and explore. What will you discover while crawling in the tunnel or floating in the stream? What will you find chomping in the trees or living in the walls? Welcome to our backyard.
Our backyard is home to over a dozen animals, most of them native to Utah. Here you'll find amphibians, reptiles, insects, and arachnids. Sometimes you have to wait and look closely to spot them. Let's learn more about some of these animals and how we care for them here in the Critter Care Room.
Welcome to the Critter Care Room. All animals need certain things to survive. They need food, water, oxygen, and shelter, a safe place. In the wild, animals find these things in their habitats. Here at the museum, everything the animals need is right here in the Critter Care Room. Most of our animals here eat crickets or vegetables or mice, so we have a place for those, full of all of those yummy goodies. We also make sure that the animals get fed the right number of times. So when our volunteers come in to feed the animals, they keep track on our Critter Care sheet. Did each animal get enough food, water? Was their enclosure cleaned? Was their temperature correct? Everything the animals need to stay safe, happy, and healthy. We also have animals that live here. When animals are on display all the time, that can get exhausting. So we have other animals that can substitute for them, and the animals on display can take a break. We also have ways to get into the animal enclosures from here in the Critter Care Room. Okay, here's our first animal. You ever seen an animal like this before? It's got slimy skin with spots, 4 legs and a tail. This is a tiger salamander. We have tiger salamanders here in Utah, but they can be hard to find. They spend a lot of time burrowed underground or hiding under rocks. Now, they are amphibians like frogs, toads, newts, which means that they go through a life cycle. They lay eggs in the water that hatch into tadpole-like babies that live in the water. As they grow legs and lungs and then come out of the water as adults. They are predators. They hunt insects, slugs, snails, but here at the museum they eat crickets and mealworms. Let's see, here's a fun fact about salamanders. They don't drink water. Instead, they soak up water through their skin. They can just sit in a puddle or in the mud and drink up the water right through their skin. So next time you are out by a pond or a freshwater stream, take a look under some rocks. You might be able to find a tiger salamander in your own backyard. All right, let's get this guy back home. Bye, little guy.
Next, we have our brown tarantula. You can find these throughout Utah and many parts of the western US. You'll notice up close that you have 2 front structures. They look a lot like legs, but really they're what we call pedipalps. They're used to hold their prey and also used to mate in the males. This one is a female, and we like to have females because they live longer. One thing you also notice are these fine hairs. They use these hairs, and we call them urticating hairs, and they'll shoot them out at any predators that would come by and try to attack it. And it tells them, ooh, I don't want to mess with this animal. This is a scary animal. I don't like this feeling. You'll notice the 8 legs. You'll find that in spiders, and that's one of their adaptations too. You'll find tarantulas in burrows typically. Other spiders might be in webs, but you'll find them underground. And you can even see one of their food items right in here is a cricket. And here at the museum, we feed them crickets, and compared to the different things they might eat in the wild, which would be insects or mice even. But for the most part, brown tarantulas are very docile animals. Next, we have our horned lizard, and you can find these throughout Utah and much of the Americas. You're gonna find them in hot, sandy, dry environments. Let's take a look at their adaptations. So if you look closely at it, you'll notice the colors even. So their colors match a lot of the desert. So they have brown colors, kind of some reddish colors. It really depends where you are. They're gonna fit their environment because that helps them camouflage and blend in better. Next up, you're gonna notice these spikes on its back and also on the back of its head. So these spikes are very useful. They're good for threatening any predators. If you come up to this, maybe you're a coyote and you think, well, I'm gonna eat that, it's gonna puff up and flatten out a bit, and it's gonna present those spikes. And you're gonna probably back off because it can be a very intimidating lizard when you're just some other predator. So we're gonna go ahead and put this little guy back. There you go. Also in captivity, we like to make sure they stay hydrated. So they're not the best at drinking water in captivity, so what we do is we have a spray bottle, and we just give them a nice little mist.
All right, now it's time for one of my personal favorite reptiles. Do you have a guess of what this might be? This is a gopher snake. Now, if you guessed a rattlesnake, well, you're not far off. Gopher snakes are adapted to mimic rattlesnakes. If you can see the end of his tail, it doesn't have a rattle on it. But when gopher snakes are threatened by a predator, they can shake the end of their tail and hiss to mimic a venomous rattlesnake. Now, gopher snakes aren't venomous. They are constrictors. They kill their prey by squeezing it super tight, like a boa or an anaconda. They can be found here in Utah, especially right here around the museum, and they hunt and eat mice, rats, other rodents. Now, if you run into a gopher snake, you should give it space because it can bite. Anything with teeth can bite you, but they're not venomous, so it wouldn't be dangerous like a rattlesnake. Here at the museum, we actually have 3 gopher snakes. We have a dad and 2 younger snakes. This one is named Spot. He's lived here at the museum for about 8 years. Here's an odd thing. Here at the museum, we feed our snakes about 1 mouse every 2 weeks. That might not seem like very much, but that's what they need to stay healthy. Snakes are adapted to only eat when they can catch their prey. So if we fed them more mice more often, they wouldn't be very healthy. All right, I think I'm gonna go ahead and return Spot back to his enclosure. Bye-bye.
Thanks for exploring our backyard and seeing some of our animals here at the Natural History Museum of Utah. Now it's your turn.
Go explore your backyard. What animals and plants can you find there? I think you'll be surprised what you can discover. Till next time, thanks for exploring our backyard with us.
Bye-bye.